The Raptors are essentially locked into the 9th seed of the Eastern Conference, and though I would favor them in any 7-game series against potential play-in opposition, in this video, I'm going to give you the 2 reasons why they could have some serious problems in the one-and-done format. Let's get into it. With Toronto's recent loss to the Boston Celtics, they are 1 game back of the Atlanta Hawks with 2 games remaining. However, the Hawks have the tiebreaker, so it would very much seem as though the Raptors are going to be locked into this 9th seed for the Eastern Conference. So their playoff hopes rest on winning 2 straight games in the play-in tournament, and there is going to be no room for error for this team, who has had so many inconsistencies this season. This team was expected to be challenging for a top 6 seed, maybe even a top 4 seed, but here they sit as the 9th seed, having to win 2 consecutive games in do-or-die settings. The Raptors clearly have some good amount of talent, and they've showcased to have a great amount of talent since the trade deadline. Adding in Jakob Poeltl has really revitalized the starting 5 for this team, though it may not have looked like that yesterday against the Celtics. The Raptors have been playing pretty good basketball, specifically with their starting lineup since the February 9th trade deadline, but even with the better on-court product that we have seen, and certainly an improvement from the Raptors in their standing. I mean, they're on the outside of the play-in tournament looking in. Now they sit as the 9th seed with a very outside chance of reaching that 8th seed. It's very arguable to say the Raptors are the best of the play-in tournament teams. Now, you might side with Miami. I completely understand that. You may side with Atlanta as well, but the Raptors are very much one of the better teams here, and I have a good amount of confidence with the talent we've seen from the starting 5 when we get to these play-in / playoff sort of settings. When you have to really lean on that starting 5 even heavier, I can expect a good amount of success for the Raptors in these play-in games. That is, if you have that buffer of a 7-game series. I would really favor the Raptors in a series against the Chicago Bulls. I would favor them in a series against the Atlanta Hawks. I think it'd be a very competitive series with the Miami Heat, but the play-in tournament doesn't function like that. And your penalty for not being one of the top 6 seeds in your conference is that you're forced into these do-or-die games where you lose a game, you are completely done. And we've seen a lot of inconsistencies from the Raptors this season, especially in this recent stretch. Despite the better performances, they still have had those games that just remind you of where they came from earlier on in the season. Like last week's loss to the Indiana Pacers, the Pacers missing so many of the key players, and the Raptors losing. Yesterday's game against the Boston Celtics, where there's no Tatum, no Smart, no Horford, no Pritchard, and the Raptors only scored 93 points. They only allowed 97, but still lost. The inconsistencies remain for this team, and that is what really scares me about these play-in tournament games. The Raptors, particularly from a shooting standpoint, have been extremely streaky this season. So if you get the Raptors on a bad night shooting-wise, which we've seen plenty of times this season, the playoff hopes are done. You go into that Chicago Bulls game and you don't have your 3-point game going in any way whatsoever, you're going to be in trouble there. A lot of what has gone wrong for the Chicago Bulls this season, well, there's been a lot of problems, but part of the problem I felt like for them has been the motivation factor, where it seems like Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan sometimes just doesn't really feel like they want to be out there. They want to really work hard to get a win for their team. But when you get to the playoffs, you could say this about any team, when you get to the playoffs, all of that goes away, of course. These teams are really going to be hustling and grinding, knowing what's at stake in this do-or-die sort of setting. And the Chicago Bulls in the last couple weeks have really taken a turn for the better defensively, which is going to make this game incredibly difficult for the Raptors if, of course, that is the 9-10 game, which we are expecting to be next Wednesday. But the streakiness of the Raptors and the inconsistencies of the Raptors really does scare me, as I want this team to make the playoffs, but we have to go 2 straight games here where we have to be on our game from a shooting standpoint. And given the inconsistencies and the lack of consistent results over the course of this season, I can't be extremely confident the Raptors are going to be able to find that sort of level. I have a good amount of faith in their defense. I have a good amount of faith in Nick Nurse. I think Nick Nurse, as far as the regular season has gone, yeah, he's been underwhelming. He's been under expectations, but when we get into those intricate matchups where it turns more into a chess match between the coaches, I think that's where Nick Nurse can really thrive and just really focus in on the specific things that are going to put his team in better position. So I kind of favor Nick Nurse for these sort of games here, but again, all of these go away if the team is not shooting well. And I just cannot go in with a great deal of confidence that this team is going to be able to produce on these specific occasions. That is a bit of a fear for these scenarios. Another problem that I do have with these one and done games for the Raptors is the clutch factor. The Raptors in the clutch this season have really struggled as a team, and specifically if you go to the top tier players on this team. Fred VanVleet in a lot of scenarios in the clutch this season, like yesterday he was horrendous against the Boston Celtics in one of the most important games of the season, but there's been a lot of open looks for Fred VanVleet in clutch scenarios this season where he has not been able to deliver. That does coincide with the shooting, the streakiness of the shooting that I spoke about earlier in the video, but also the clutch factor goes against Pascal Siakam as well. Last season, I felt like Pascal Siakam was incredibly clutch, and the conversations about him not being clutch I thought were ridiculous. They were ludicrous because late on in the season, especially as the Raptors really made a push for that 5th seed late in the season, Siakam was the man. I mean, late game, close game, the offense was give the ball to Pascal Siakam, get out of the way, let him cook, let him create. And more often than not, that is exactly what he did. He would find his spot in mid-range. He would get his spots at the rim. There were so many different ways he could manipulate the defense to go and get a bucket, go and score for this team. That was great to see. This season, though, despite Pascal Siakam having been excellent, we're seeing career-high numbers in many different key statistical categories. When it comes to the clutch, that is where he's really faltered. He's settling a lot more for his mid-range jumpers than getting to the rim, and I think that's okay. Siakam is a decent mid-range shooter, shooting about 40% from mid-range this season. But when it comes to the clutch, his shooting numbers really drop. If you see this list here, the bottom 10 players in terms of efficiency in the clutch being labeled as last 5 minutes of a game where the score is either tied or within 5 points. Siakam is bottom 10 here. Now, you see some pretty key names on this list as well. Like, pretty crazy to see Giannis Antetokounmpo on this list. But I'm not going to be super concerned with what other teams are doing here. I'm going to be concerned with what my favorite team is doing here. And for Pascal Siakam, this team certainly relies on him in these settings to take us over the line, and he just has not done that to a consistent degree this season. And if this stat is not enough, this one is even worse. On go-ahead field goals in the NBA this season in the clutch, there's been no player worse at taking those shots than Pascal Siakam. So as far as the clutch conversations around Pascal Siakam this season, like 1 of 11 on go-ahead field goals in the clutch, that is a big indictment against his game. And that's a bigger factor that goes into these play-in games. You have a bad clutch game in a 7-game series, you hope to bounce back in the next game. But if you can't deliver in a tight game where everything is on the line, the complete season is on the line here, where you lose, you go home. You win, you're either in the playoffs or you march on to the next round. But if you lose, you go home. With everything on the line there, with the amount of pressure on those scenarios here, there hasn't been a lot this season that will instill confidence in Raptors fans that they're going to be able to get over the line and find a way to will this team towards a win and to get them into the playoffs. As far as the Raptors on the surface, looking at the team, I think they're better than the Chicago Bulls. I think they're better than the Bulls by a pretty good degree as well. I think they're better than the Atlanta Hawks. I think they match up quite well against the Miami Heat, though I am quite fearful of having to play the Miami Heat in a potential play-in game. But overall, I have a great amount of confidence that this is a great team here and that we have great players who can win these close games. And we've seen a bunch of these guys in the most high-pressure setting in basketball, in an NBA Finals, where Fred VanVleet excelled and was absolutely phenomenal in NBA Finals. Pascal Siakam was excellent in that 2019 NBA Finals. Like, we've seen our top-tier players at the highest level deliver consistently, but maybe we haven't quite seen them as the best players in the team having to deliver and being able to do that consistently. So that's where a little bit of my confidence has been shaken, and it boils down to the inconsistencies of the shooting this season and the inconsistencies, or to be honest, the consistently not being a great team in the clutch. And I feel like both of those things are really going to have to be on in 2 straight games for this team to have any hope of making the playoffs. But what if they lose? What if they don't make the playoffs? At this point, with the Raptors having decided the trade deadline, they want to be a winning team, they want to make the playoffs. I want this team to make the playoffs. But it's not a bad consolation prize to lose in the play-in tournament and all of a sudden your name is in the hat in the NBA lottery. There's some really, really good point guards I'm interested in for the draft that are going to be going just around 10th in the draft, towards 10 to 14 in the draft. So moving up 3-4 places in the draft, that could be a big difference. That could be a significant change for your franchise for the foreseeable future with the caliber of a player that you're going to get in the draft. So again, I want this team to be in the playoffs. I understand you're going to run into Milwaukee, you're going to run into Boston, and you're very, very likely not going to win that series. I completely understand that aspect of everything that is going on. But this team could use that experience. This team could do with getting themselves into the playoffs, just having that victory of winning in the play-in tournament, having that victory of winning those 2 straight games and getting over the line and achieving the goal of getting into the playoffs. Even if that means you lose in like 4, 5, 6 games in the first round, I think that's worth it for this team. But again, it's not a bad consolation prize to get yourself in the lottery if it doesn't work out. I love this team. There's a lot to like about this team, but the things that I don't like about this team have me quite fearful for this play-in tournament. So what do you think? Are you confident about the play-in tournament? Do you agree with my sentiments? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, because that is it for me for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, be sure to hit that like button. I do videos about the Raptors on this channel as well. I do live stream watch parties for every single Raptors game for the rest of the season and potentially the playoffs as well as the play-in game. And I do shorts about the Raptors. So if you like what you see, want more Raptors content, hit that subscribe button, help us on the road to 14,000 subs, and I'll see you again next time for another video.